Hello everyone, welcome back to this look back at my old superhero drawings here. We left off with Scion. I had just turned the page to him when I realized what time it was. So if you remember from last week, we talked about Matthew and Harold. Where are they? These kids here. So you may have recognized that the patterns continued from there, but basically Matthew and Harold, when they finally find each other, the same thing that happened when they were babies starts happening again, and they like fuse into Scion, which is not a great name. I wish I had a better one, but that's what he called himself. And Scion was basically equivalent to like Dr. Manhattan or the Amazo robot in the Justice League cartoon, in that once the children combined and became this grown man, for some reason, I don't remember the logic behind that, but they become this character who proceeds to basically exit from the narrative pretty quickly, because Scion, when Matthew and Harold were separate, they couldn't relate to anybody, and Scion is just worse. The power set for Scion, when I was creating him, at the time I was really into Dungeons and Dragons and reading the Dungeons and Dragons manuals and the Psionics handbook. Basically, Scion's powers were the full like list of powers from that book, basically, which basically meant he could do anything. Is the short way of saying it, is that he had the psychic ability that manifested in a way that basically made him a physical god. So he kind of became like a hermit and left, and I think I would have used him as like a Deus Ex Machina type character when needed for like really big stories, but for the most part he wouldn't factor into the universe because he was kind of too big for the universe, and that was the whole idea with Scion. So there, now you get the conclusion to the Matthew and Harold storyline from before. Moving on here, we have Push. Push feels like he should have been on a team, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't. I might have retroactively put him on a team later, but his power is basically like a force field power, but for whatever reason I had him use it more as just he pushed things. But basically, I think it's more useful to say he had like a force field power. But used offensively, it was just a matter of like hitting somebody with a force field, which is why he's standing there with his hand like that. I think he was inspired by a character in the Static Shock cartoon, but I don't remember for sure. Just something about him reminds me of that cartoon, so I'm assuming that was where the inspiration came from, some like one episode character or something that came from that. I don't really remember the show very well, but that's all there is for Push. And yeah, I guess this is also another character that could have been the stand-in for Batman on the cover of this folder, but anyway, moving on. Quicksilver, and I have erased here Speedy. I don't know why I could not think of an original name for this character. He's had to have an existing superhero's name. At least Speedy wasn't a speedster like Quicksilver, so I don't know. But basically, he's basically Kid Flash, and he was meant for that Teen Titans type group that I mentioned before. Again, a lot of the characters in that group, I think, started out as me wanting to have an equivalent character from some teen superhero. And Quicksilver here was more Kid Flash than Quicksilver, but he was still just a super speedster like those characters. Redemption was a character that he was an experiment for me in terms of like source material, because you've probably noticed a lot of these characters I'm like, well, this character I created because I wanted to have a Kid Flash, or I wanted to have an equivalent of this, or I felt like I needed a Hulk character, or I felt like I needed this kind of character, I felt like I needed a bow and arrow guy. But I started when I was in like middle school, I think, maybe junior high, around that age, when I was getting a little bit older, because a lot of these characters, the drawings are new, but these are very old characters, and Redemption was my attempt to make a character based on a wrestler. He was inspired by The Undertaker. Like, as soon as I said wrestler, anyone who knows wrestling probably knew the inspiration here. But the idea was I wanted to take a look at Undertaker's long-form story over his whole career, which was still in progress at that point. But, you know, like his major rivals and things of that nature, and then use that as the basis for a superhero story. So he would battle a lot of characters that were analogs for wrestlers that Undertaker had fought. And that was the basic premise. Let's see, I know we've talked about at least one of those characters. I didn't mention the inspiration at the time, but Deadshot here was Bret Hart. And so, like, there's a few characters in here that, in one way or another, were inspired by a wrestler in that way. They weren't, like, exactly like those characters. They were, you know, superhero characters, but the basic premise was there. The reasons for the fights often were still there. And Redemption's power was basically like I didn't give him like the Undertaker's power. Like if I was just gonna make the Undertaker super, he would have like super strength and durability and the ability to shoot lightning out of his hands or stuff like that. But Redemption's power was similar in origin, but it was that he would come back from the dead. If he died, he would come back, and that was basically it. But the character, I wanted him to be a bit more like just like a gothic cowboy type figure, in that he was somebody who would come back from the dead every time he was killed, but he was very silent, like a man of few words. He would travel across the continent of North America and just interact with people that way and have different stories. And I really liked this character at the time. This was one of my favorite characters and one I thought I would do a lot of stories with, because I had a lot of the characters in here were just made based off of that premise of, well, who was Undertaker's biggest rivals. And I'm not going to list everyone when I come across them, because a lot of them I might have even forgotten. But if a character reminds you of a wrestler, it's probable that they were meant to tie into Redemption's story. Okay, Redman here. I've mentioned several times in this the superhero team I made when I was in college, whose name I don't remember, but they were a large number of diverse characters, very different powers, and they had a long form story that I was working on where the team would evolve and grow and change, and Redman was the leader of that group. I think he just had super strength. I don't think he had. I think that was his power, but that was basically it. And he was the leader of that group that had like Faye and Green Panther, and a few of the other characters we've covered so far. He was the leader of that group, and I think that's really it. It's just that he was like a strong, square-jawed type hero to lead that team. Risk. This is an old character. I don't remember what this drawing was from. I remember drawing this at a young age, but I can't remember what I was referencing from at the time, which is unusual. That doesn't happen often. That I don't have any recollection. But Risk was basically, like, from a personality and character perspective, he was mostly like a Wolverine type, but from a power perspective, he didn't have any. I think he was one of those. Yeah, I mentioned before that when the first superhero in this world retired, there was a lot of copycat heroes that came up before the arrival of Vibranium, that was the genesis for superpowers in this universe. So Risk didn't have powers. I guess another. I think that some of the inspiration might have come from Daredevil, in that like the name Risk was meant to imply that he was like just like fearless and willing to take lots of big risks and do things like that. So he had a bow here, or a staff that he fought with. I think it's metal, and he would just go around on the streets and hit people with his stick, basically. And he was a little bit more complicated than that, but he was supposed to be a character that once superheroes started coming around, he started feeling more useless, and he kind of retired from active superheroing, but then would become sort of a mentor character to other superheroes. I don't remember specifically who, but I like the idea of like this, because he's probably in his 30s when he starts, and by the time he retires, he's more in his 40s. Superheroes have been around for a little while at that point, and they're pretty easy to find. And I just like this idea of this kind of aging, not old, but aging veteran superhero kind of mentoring the younger heroes who might feel like they had it easier because they had superpowers, or might take things for granted that he didn't have, and then him kind of helping them become more well-rounded and fully realized heroes with his experience combined with their powers. So that was Risk. He was his real purpose was to come after he retired, but he was a character I liked. Sable here. I know I said a lot of wrestlers were based, or a lot of superheroes were based off wrestlers, but Sable was not based off of the wrestler Sable. Kind of like Asuka was a coincidence at the time. I just liked. I wanted this character to be named after a color, and then I was going to color her outfit that color. And I went around and looking around, and Sable was the word that stuck out when I was looking at like a list of color names. And that's really all there is to her name. But she was an assassin character. She didn't have powers, but unlike the other assassin we had, she also wasn't like running from a league or anything. But she was a heroic figure. But she would kind of butt heads with like superheroes with no kill codes and things like that. Who like she might be targeting some like villain or crime boss or whatever, and then the superhero would end up having to protect that crime boss from her and battle her, even though they were both trying to stop the same person ultimately. And that was really it. She was a character that was going to appear in other people's stories, like a few of these. Seraph. Okay, so you guys may remember, I referenced him earlier in this video, but you guys may remember Eagle Eye. When I talked about him, I said, I felt like I needed a bow and arrow guy, but the only reason I would keep him around is because he's essential to the origin story of a character I actually do like, and that's Seraph. Seraph would eventually join that Teen Titans type group, but her story was that she was a teenage girl and living in the town that Eagle Eye operated in, whatever city he was supposed to be in. And he was like this big cult figure, this guy running around with a bow and arrow, stopping crime or whatever. And she got the bright idea to imitate him. And so she bought a bow and arrow and like practiced in like her backyard or her basement or something. And she got to be like a decent shot, but not the kind of not the kind of bow and arrow marksmanship that you would expect from a superhero with that theme. But she got good enough, and so she went out and tried to. I think there was a story about her parents or her parent, I don't remember, owing money to like a crime boss or like the mafia or something like that. And so she thinks that she'll take down this criminal organization, but it doesn't go well. She ends up beaten and shot and wounded, and they dump her into like a pool and leave her there to like drown while she's bleeding out. But she's found by Eagle Eye, who happens to be working the same case, you could say, but he's also trying to undermine this criminal organization. He saves her and nurses her back to health and kind of takes her under his wing, and he starts training her, and she becomes a much better shot because of that, and then eventually becomes like his sidekick and a member of that teenage superhero group that I had mentioned. But that's it. I like this character though. She had I think she had like platinum hair and like a blue outfit. I just thought she was cool, and I liked the progression from like a novice to an expert that her story would have told. Moving on, Seton. Okay, this might take a little bit for me to remember everything about Seton. There's two characters to Seton's story, and I think there was several like reboots mentally of like what their story was. I think the last version of their story, originally they were like brothers in like ancient Egypt that got like sealed away and then like broke free, and there was like a mummy thing. But I think the revitalized story was that it was just like an ancient yin and yang struggle between like these magical forces. I don't know. It probably wasn't even magic, because I don't like using magic, and I don't think I had any magic characters. But there was some kind of ancient something that was sealed away. That was the basis of it, and then it like came out, and I think in the final version it was like a force that like possessed these two teenage boys. And again, a lot of it's shady. I can't even remember for sure what the other character looked like, but I remember that there was two of them, and there was like a good one and a not so good one. I can't remember if the other one was evil or an anti-hero, but Seton, despite his like Spawn cape, I think Seton was the heroic one, and I think he had like an on-again, off-again type of relationship with the teenage superhero group. I don't think he was an official member, but I think he would work with them occasionally, just because of his age. But I don't remember a lot about him. I think I probably had a lot of visual cues I wanted to put into a character, like these big gauntlets and everything, but I don't remember a lot about him beyond like recognizing this drawing. I definitely remember drawing this one, but I don't remember a lot of the story behind him. It's possible I meant to flesh it out later and just never got around to it. Shade here is a I think he was another copycat hero that came in after Shadow retired, and we should be getting to Shadow soon. He might be the next one, but that's why he has like a similar name, and he had more. I don't know what this hat's supposed to be. If it's like, it's not a cowboy hat, obviously, but I don't remember. It's probably meant to look like Undertaker's hat. I had mentioned Redemption earlier, but I really like the Undertaker, so it's probably meant to look like that. But I think I did want him to eventually end up getting powers. Like he was another like street level powerless superhero, and then I think I wanted him to get some kind of powers, kind of like the Shade, the villainous character in DC. But I don't know if I ever decided for sure if he would get powers. But he was just he started out, his origin was that he was another one of those superheroes that came in to try and fill up the void that Shadow left when he retired. And there's Shadow. Okay, this is a redesign. Originally, his outfit was like a completely black jumpsuit, like no extra stylization, like none of these lines all over like you see in comics today. He didn't have special gloves or anything. He was just completely solid black. He didn't have eye holes, so he was faceless. And he had like a bright red cape, and eventually he lost the cape. And then later I gave him eyes, and then later I added details to his tights. But Shadow was the first superhero. His origin story was that he was a martial artist, and he moved to, I think it was New York. And one night he witnessed a mugging outside of his apartment, and he just like went and stopped it. Basically, he like leapt out of his window and like came down the fire escape and like frightened off the muggers or whatever. I don't remember exactly. I never got around to writing his origin story, because his first story, which I did write twice, I wrote his first story twice. But in that he was already active, and then he was going to reveal kind of his path to becoming a superhero in flashbacks and conversations and like interviews and stuff as he became more of a celebrity. But basically he comes into prominence stopping some more high-profile crimes, because eventually after stopping the one mugging he starts getting kind of addicted to it almost, and he starts putting together a costume, and eventually like it starts out he's just wearing like a ski mask, and then by the end he's got this full outfit that he's made. And he by stopping some of these high-profile crimes and kind of being involved in these larger stories that are getting media attention, he becomes a celebrity figure. And eventually he has a lot of, I had a whole lot of stories planned out for him. He was the most developed of the characters, and it would take a whole episode's worth of time just to talk through all of them. But eventually he would, he got married to his Lois Lane, who was a reporter that was covering his story early on, a television reporter, not a newspaper reporter, but still, he developed a relationship with her because she was covering him. And then there would be a storyline where a villain managed to unmask him publicly, and so suddenly he had this this public like he was no longer like had a secret identity basically, and so he became a celebrity in more ways than one, and eventually was forcibly retired by an assassination attempt during a parade in his honor, and he would be crippled by that. And I think this wasn't the intent, but I think that the scene where he was shot is very reminiscent of JFK. And like I said, I wasn't intentionally trying to pay homage to it. That was just at a young age. That was my idea of how somebody got shot. So, but he's crippled by that, and so he's wheelchair bound, and him and his wife moved to Brazil to retire, and eventually later he's kind of brought back into things when a criminal organization starts kind of targeting people. Somebody from his past is powerful in this organization and targets him. I don't remember if they killed or kidnapped his wife, but something happens to his family, and he has to kind of come back, and he becomes a mentor to that superhero team that I don't remember very well, that I've been mentioning a lot. The one that Redman was the leader of, if I can remember where he was. We just looked at him, but there's been a lot of characters we've looked at, and about halfway through the story, Shadow was going to come on, not in his superhero garb, but as a wheelchair-bound civilian, but he would be able to teach him combat, because within this universe, if you were to rank the skill of hand-to-hand fighters, he'd be the top one. So he would help train the team and basically work with them to take down the people that had targeted him, because this was the team that was already fighting them. And so and that's basically where his story would have ended, is as a support member of that group. But he was the inspiration for superheroes in this universe. He was the one that had inspired all those copycats I keep talking about. And his existence and presence as like a major pop culture figure by the time he retired made it easier for people to transition into the job of superhero once superpowers came in. I don't usually like stopping in like the middle. Normally I would shift it over and go ahead and do another one, but we're at about our time limit, so I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick up on the other side of this next time. So in the meantime, thanks again for watching. I hope you're enjoying hearing about all my crazy ideas I had when I was a kid, crazy unoriginal ideas that I had as a kid, and I will see you all next time. Bye.